So I want to thank everybody tonight for coming. My name is Patty Schramm. I'm the parent resource trainer for the SALT Talks. This month we are talking about my child is 18, now what? So one of the things that was very challenging for me, and some of you have heard me say it before, but just you identify transition. It's kind of like, oh, okay, we're going through this transition in high school, and you're getting prepared, maybe with your IEP or whatever for graduation, but then your child turns 18 in the midst of all that. What does that mean? How things change? And there is a lot of different things that happen with the school, with 18, with graduation. There's many, many things that go on during that time. So as some of you have been attending this earlier this month with, my child is 18 now, what we touched on Social Security. So now we're going to look at funding. What kind of funding is there? I mean, there's these different things, different services that become available or benefits, and it's just a way to make you aware of what is available and how do you tap into it? What questions do you ask? This is just to help get you thinking about maybe when you sit down with your SSA or your transition coordinator, when you get to that point, just what can we talk, what does this, I heard about this, how does that affect me, or how does that apply to our situation? So tonight we have Sheila Bloom. She's with the Greene County Board of Developmental Disabilities, and she'll be giving us a presentation on understanding funding sources, or, like a waiver 101. So I'm going to turn it over to Sheila, and I made you co-host so you can share your screen.
All right, let's see if I can get this pulled up. All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Like Patty said, my name is Sheila Bloom, and I'm the Fiscal Services Manager for the Greene County Board of DD. And I've been with Greene County for about 20 years now. So I've been in a few different roles. I've been an SSA, I've been a waiver coordinator, Medicaid Services Manager, and now our Fiscal Services Manager. So a little bit of everything. Tonight, we're going to go over just some basics about the waiver system with the boards of DD. A lot of the information I'm going to give you is generic across all county boards. However, the rates and some of the other information will be specific to Greene County. If you are from a different county and you have additional questions or want to know who to reach out to, put your information in the chat box or get with Patty. I'll share my information at the end of this as well, and I'm happy to get you connected with whoever we need to get you connected to get your questions answered. So some of the topics we're going to cover tonight are going to be eligibility for waiver services, the Ohio assessment for intermediate need and current needs, the three waivers currently administered by county boards, which are the individual options waiver, the level 1 waiver, and the self waiver, and then different alternative options that could be available in your county. Specifically, we're going to talk about what we have available here in Greene County. So some of the background information on waivers. Waivers follow federal Medicaid rules in that you have to be eligible for Medicaid to be enrolled on a waiver. Um, and a lot of times that waiver eligibility and Medicaid eligibility go hand in hand. So county boards are able to work with their local job and family services to get through some of those Medicaid hiccups, and that if you've applied for Medicaid in the past and been denied, a lot of times working with your county board when you're looking at waiver enrollment can help you get through some of those hurdles. There are waivers for different programs and different populations. There's passport waivers. There's Ohio home care waiver, which is more medically involved waivers. And then obviously the three waivers that I talked about that are administered through county boards. We're going to talk a little bit about the breakdown of waiver funded programs and where those dollars come from, where they go, what they can be used for, how waivers have changed over the years, initial waiver enrollment and ongoing waiver enrollment, what those look like, and then the flexibility and portability of waiver services within the state of Ohio. So, like I said, to be eligible for waiver services, an individual has to become Medicaid eligible. That's something that your county board can assist you with as you start going through the waiver enrollment process. Um, it's a little bit different once you're looking at Medicaid eligibility for waiver purposes. We no longer look at household income when looking at Medicaid eligibility. So we will just strictly be looking at the individual that's enrolling, and they will need to have their individual resource limit currently under $2,000. So that's resources in bank accounts, things outside of stable accounts or protected trusts. And your county board usually has a point person that will help walk you through that Medicaid eligibility process. So in order to become eligible for waiver services, an individual has to meet what's called the Intermediate Care Facility for Individuals with Intellectual Disabilities. And what that means is that we go through an assessment process called the level of care, and that determines what areas of assistance your loved one needs help with. What you are waiving when we talk about waivers is the fact that your individual meets the level of care that could be served in a facility-based setting. However, you are choosing to waive that service and receive those services within the community or within your home as opposed to in a facility. So when we talk about waivers, that's the service that you're waiving. So one part of waiver eligibility is making sure that the individual can benefit from ongoing services and supports and use at least one waiver service annually. That waiver service can be anything from adult day support after high school, homemaker personal care services in the home or in the community, home delivered meals, transportation, remote supports. There's all kinds of different services available through the waiver, and your individual needs to use at least one waiver service per span year. Another aspect of eligibility for waiver services, specifically the level one, is that the individual has a network of family and friends and professionals that can all kind of wrap around the individual to help them meet those needs. And that can be a combination of natural supports, paid staff, unpaid staff, community resources, um, things like church connections, work connections, just kind of a wraparound service to help identify and meet the needs of that individual. And then within the level one and the self waiver is the ability to self-direct services. So this means the ability to work with a loved one or on their own with their SSA to say, these are the services that I want, and this is how much I'm willing to pay out of my budget for those services. And all of those definitions are set forth in Ohio Revised Code and Ohio Administrative Code. So the Ohio Assessment for Immediate Need and Current Need. Years and years ago, throughout the state of Ohio, we had waiting lists for services. We had waiting lists for residential services, for community services, and within those waiting lists, we had priority categories. So some of those categories were aging caregiver, which meant the person primarily taking care of the individual was over the age of 60. We had individuals, child and adult with intense needs, and then we had some other categories between county boards. So historically speaking, individuals were sitting on a waiting list for an average of at least 10 years or more in some situations. Obviously, that's not conducive to anybody getting their needs met or services being provided. And at one point, there was over 88,000 people across the state of Ohio sitting on waiting lists. So as a state, we revamped that system, and now we've gone to a needs-based assessment instead of families just saying, hey, I want my loved one on the waiting list. So this current assessment process that we have in place, you can request that through your county board, you can request it through your SSA, and what it is it's an assessment that can be done at any point in time. If there's significant life change coming up, such as your individual graduating or separating from school, turning 18, getting ready to move out on their own, homemaker situation where maybe the person taking care of them isn't quite able to meet those needs anymore. Whatever that life situation or that life change is, you can request to have a waiting list assessment done. And what that is going to say, it is going to be a whole host of questions, kind of talking about every aspect of life and what unmet needs the individual might have. At the end of that assessment, the system will give us a response of whether there are no unmet needs, which means everything's kind of okay where things are at right now, whether there's a current need, which means in the next 12 months, we can see that there's going to be a change in circumstances that might need a little bit extra supports. And then immediate need, which means in the next 30 to 60 days, we need to get some services rolling and get some things in place. If there's a current need or an immediate need, your individual's name will then be placed on the waiting list in the county that you reside in. The waiting list of old, you could be on the waiting list in all 88 counties if you wanted to. So now the current rule is that you can only reside on the waiting list in the county in which you live. So that's changed those waiting lists quite a bit. And here in Greene County, I think we have about 10 to 12 people on our waiting lists right now. So waivers administered by county boards. The first in the first waiver type we're going to talk about is the individual options waiver. This waiver is kind of like what people think of as like our Cadillac waiver. It has the biggest range of services on it. It also has the highest funding sources on it. So funding for the individual options waiver, there are 9 different funding ranges that are determined by an assessment called the ODDP, or Ohio Developmental Disabilities Profile. That assessment is going to determine what funding range your individual falls within. And within those funding ranges is what establishes the budget for services. Services can include homemaker personal care, which is typically what we would think of as aid type services, somebody to come in and help your loved one do activities of daily living, take them out into the community, and just kind of address those day-to-day type needs. Transportation services can include transportation to community outings, to different programs, recreation, doctor's appointments, those kind of things. Home modifications can be um, things like grab bars, ramps, doorway widening, shower modifications, and those types of activities. Respite, it's exactly what it sounds like. It can be in the home, it can be in the community, it can be at a different facility. Respite services is a waiver service. Remote supports can be anything from, you know, telephone reminders to take medications. It can be remote check-ins where you have a camera in your kitchen and they check in to help with cooking, making sure the stove gets turned off, if that's just, some minimal supports your individual needs. Um, Ring door cameras to help watch who's coming and going in and out of the house, um, to see when your individual gets home. When they leave for day program, make sure that those things are going okay. Home delivered meals. We have a couple of different agencies that we work with that can provide all sorts of, dietary restriction meals if that's something that your individual needs a little bit of help with. Oops. Um,
Tomorrow in Jamestown.
Whether it is low sodium, whether it's diabetic diets, any kind of those dietary restrictions can be met through the various options of home delivered meals. Recent changes to services within the IO waiver are residential respite and shared living. Shared living is when an individual resides with their caregiver who provides the majority of their care and they get paid a daily rate to provide that service. Residential respite is those little bit of respite hours to help that shared living provider ensure that health and safety needs are met and also to give that little bit of a break to that shared living provider. Other recent changes are parents of minors as paid caregivers, extraordinary care, which is almost exactly what it sounds like, that the care the individual needs is above and beyond what is typical for that age group. And then rate increases for our providers. Being able to have waiver services is a great option here in Ohio, but we need to have the staff that are able to provide those services. So those rate increases have helped us to be able to maintain and keep the providers that we do have while attracting additional providers into the field. One of the other waivers that we currently administer is the level one, and we've seen some rate increases in that waiver as well. And where the IO waiver has 9 different funding ranges, the level one has 2. We have an adult and a child. For the instances of waiver services, a child is considered anyone who has not formally separated from school. So as you guys, I'm sure, have talked about, separation from school can look a little bit different for everyone. And some schools use different terminology where they'll graduate, but they won't separate. Or they'll walk with their class that they've gone all the way through school with, but they'll come back for those super senior years. So when we're talking about a child, we're talking about someone who is not formally separated from school and is still getting education-based services. Adults are individuals who will no longer at any point in time be receiving services from public education. So as of right now, the adult budget is $62,136 per span year, and the child is $41,424. And that difference in funding amount is meant to capture those adult day services. So those services that would take the place of the typical school hours that children are receiving education-based services. The link here on this slide, which Patty will have those slides if anyone wants those afterwards, you can click on that link and it'll give you a really basic kind of overview breakdown of the differences between the waiver types and the different services offered underneath those waivers. Within the level one budget, there's also a limit of $2,500 per span year for something called Participant Directed Goods and Services, or PDGS. And those are items that are outside the typical adaptive equipment that we might see under our other waivers. Some of those things could include, iPads or adaptive equipment that maybe you can find on Amazon, you know, um, fidget devices or stimulation items, those kind of things that are a little bit outside of the norm for Medicaid. We can use the waiver to purchase those services through outside vendors like Amazon, um, therapy resources that therapists have access to but aren't Medicaid providers. And then another new service is self-directed transportation, which in Greene County has typically looked like Uber. Um, we don't have a lot of mass transit here in Greene County. So self-directed transportation is an option for individuals to use their waiver services to access things like Uber. And we have an assessment process here in Greene County that helps to identify whether or not your specific individual is able to handle all of the different steps in accessing Uber and utilizing that as a way to get to and from community events, recreation events. And we even have some folks that use it for employment-based services because for them, and maybe how often their schedule changes, that's a more realistic option for them than trying to pre-schedule trips with a transit authority. So those are some of the level one services that are currently available. The self waiver looks a lot like the level one and that the cost cap for children is the same. However, there's some different services available underneath the self waiver than there are under the level one. And a lot of these are those participant-directed services that I talked about, where the family can help the individual choose providers and choose rates of pay within reason, within the allowed rules to set for those services. So participant-directed HPC, for example, looks a lot like HPC under the level one and the IO. However, participant directed, it allows for some flexibility to allow families to work with their providers to set a different rate of pay within a certain set of parameters. So what it can do is help to stretch that waiver funding a little bit farther or provide a little bit more of an incentive to providers to work with your loved one. Participant directed goods and services we just talked about. Clinical therapeutic intervention. The way that I've seen that work a lot in Greene County is for services that look similar to ABA type therapies, where it's you need a little bit more of a specialized provider to provide that structure and routine and skill reinforcement that is a little bit above and beyond what your typical HPC provider is. We do have a few agencies within Greene County that are certified for this service, and it has a tiered funding based on the education level of the provider providing that service. So that might be, you end up working with staff who have a master's degree in a specific therapy or somebody that has additional training and certifications. And so that reimbursement rate for that service is a little bit higher. Residential and community respite, we've talked about a little bit. Remote supports and assistive tech. Again, those things are like cameras or alerts or ring doorbells, those kind of services. And then the functional behavioral assessment is something that can be done up to one time per span year. And it's like a detailed therapy report that gives strategies and suggestions on how to better help providers work with your loved one. Patty, are there any questions so far?
Yes, there is a question that's out there.
Okay.
So the question is regarding child versus adult and school.
Mhm.
If a child, a minor, has a waiver and would turn 18 while still attending high school, has not completed 12th grade yet, does that child have to move on to the adult version of school without having received the usual academic services through the 12th grade year?
No, so we have a lot of kiddos, I say kiddos, that are 18 that are still attending public schools that are still classified as a child for waiver purposes. Um, and that's where, I think this is a good time, that Patty are having these because you guys have talked about what does it look like when my child turns 18. So this is one of those things that gets a little squirrely definition wise because yes, at 18, all of a sudden they can have a guardian or they cannot have a legal guardian. Under most laws, they're considered an adult and they could separate from school, but as long as they are still receiving educational services through the school district, they'll maintain at a child waiver level until they formally separate from school. So that could be any 16, 17, 18, all the way up to 22. So they won't change classifications to become an adult for waiver purposes until they formally separate from school. So that looks a little bit different for every family.
Does that answer your question? Um, does that cover it for you? Yes. So
Okay.
we're
Any
good.
other any other questions so far?
Not at this time.
Okay. All right. Let's see if I can
Oh,
find
I'm
one more.
sorry. One just popped in. That's just for
Okay.
level one waiver question.
That's for level one and self waivers. Yep. IO waivers does not have the distinction between adult and child. Yep. And then for self-waiver adults, like I said, the cap is similar to the level one adult. And the only thing that changes as far as the availability of services is that last one here where it's adult day array and non-medical transportation. Non-medical transportation is a little bit of a unique term in that we classify non-medical transportation as transportation to and from adult day programming, employment, or volunteer opportunities. So it's technically not going to the doctor's office, but it's more than just regular transportation. So that is specific to adult services and to the adult portions of the self and the level one waiver. So that's why you see that extra dollar amount for the adults is to capture that non-medical transportation and those adult day array services. GT Independence is a company that DODD has partnered with as a financial management service. So GT Independence handles the payment authorization for all of the participant directed services. So it's some of the self and some of the level one. And so it is a third party company that handles payment for PDGS services, independent providers of participant directed HPC, and self directed transportation. So it's a little bit of extra paperwork and hoops sometimes to jump through to get those services authorized and paid for. But that's something that is your SSA's responsibility to help you understand and navigate as you choose to utilize those services.
Sheila, can you the PD-HPC? Can you what does that stand for?
So that stands for Participant Directed Homemaker Personal Care. And that is the PD part is the participant directed. So that's going to tell you it's usually under the self waiver, but sometimes level one. And then HPC is homemaker personal care, or what most people would talk to or think of as aid type services. So somebody that helps your loved one shower, use the restroom, take them out on outings, work with them on life skills in the home, those kind of things. So that's where that participant directed HPC comes from.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right. So adult day array services are adult day supports. There's a lot of different services that fall under adult day array. So adult day support is one where it's typically at a location and it's a set setting, and they could do all kinds of different activities depending on what that particular day program decides to do. In Greene County, we have a wide variety of day programs that all look a little bit different. They all have a little bit different flair, different things that they're known for. We have some that are, very active and lots of activities going on during the day. We have some that are like farm type based. We have some that are very laid back and, they like to watch the movies. They like to go walk at the mall. They like to do different outings, activities. Every program has its own flair and its own thing that they choose to focus on. Vocational habilitation services is where your loved one is working towards skills that would help them become employable. So these are things that, can be skill building within a facility, things like learning to take out the trash or learning to fold sheets or to hang items up on hangers. These are working on transferable skills that can help down the road should your individual choose that they want to pursue employment. Vocational habilitation is covered under the adult day array services. Some other services covered are individual employment supports and group employment supports. The easiest way to think of those is job coaching. So somebody that's there with your individual, helping them to learn the job, get acclimated to the job and provide them with those steps that they need and reinforcements to perform that job. The only difference between these two services is exactly what it sounds. They're one-on-one or they're in a group of two or more. So individual versus group. And then these are some of the newer specialized type day services that can be offered. Career discovery, helping to figure out what do I want to do. I say I want a job. What does that look like? I have no idea what kind of job I want. So this can help your individual figure out what things they might be good at, what things they want to do, those type of things. So career discovery and career exploration often go hand in hand. Um, Self-employment, situational observation, things like, okay, we found a job. Now we're going to kind of see what supports might be needed. Same thing with worksite accessibility. We've got a job or we're close to getting a job, but I might need little adaptations to make it successful for me. Job development is, providers working to go out in the community and say, hey, I have this really cool person that would love to work with animals. What can I do to help them find a job? So that might be reaching out to doggy daycares, hey, do you have anything that this individual could do? Could they come in and clean? Could they help walk dogs? Could they do a play group? So that job development is, I have this individual or a group of folks that are really interested in this, but we don't really know that there's job opportunities. So let's go see if we can create some job opportunities. And then benefits education and analysis goes perfectly with your Social Security discussions you guys have had. So, okay, my individual is getting ready to get a job or they've been offered a job. Now we need to think about how much money can they make without losing their benefits, or what impact would this job have on their benefits, so that the team is fully aware and fully informed of what it looks like to balance having a job with being able to maintain the benefits that they have. So those are all services that can be paid for through the waiver under the adult day array options. Do you have any other questions before we move on to, okay. All right. So next we're going to talk about non-medical transportation, which, like I said, is transportation to and from day programs, job sites, volunteer opportunities. In Greene County, our current rate for non-medical transportation per trip, so that would be like taking me from my house to my job site, is $28.01. And then to take me from my job site back home is another $28.01. Now, if you choose a transportation provider or you're in a situation where it makes more sense and you meet the definition of the rule, we'll go per mile. So per mile is this fun little chart here where we look at how many individuals are in the vehicle and then whether you require a modified or a non-modified vehicle. Modified vehicles are things like the bigger vans or buses that have wheelchair tie downs where the straps are locked in, where there might be permanent seat belts attached. So we'll look at what that requirement for the individual is. Do they need a modified or a non-modified vehicle? And how many people are on that trip? So then we'll start looking at the costs per mile for those individuals. And then competitive integrated employment. I can never get that term right. That's a new one. So this is where we've got individuals that are working in the community and maybe have that very different work schedule from everybody else, where they need that specialized provider to take them to and from their employment sites. That's a new service with a new rate, and it's really expensive. So that's something that your SSA will work with you on, is to balance what services meet the needs of your individual and keeps them within their budget limitations as well. So another fun new rule change is that the amount of trips and the amount of miles that can be authorized at the same time. Again, this is your SSA's responsibility to help you manage. This is not up to the family. This is not the expectation of the family. that you have to do all this math and all this budget planning. That's what your SSA is for. They'll work with you to establish what the identified needs are, and then they will help you come up with a plan for services that meet those needs and keep your individual within their budget. All right, in Greene County, and again, this piece specifically is going to be different depending on which county you live in. So in Greene County, we offer programs such as family support services, where we go up to $1,000 per individual residing at home without a waiver. So services that can be covered under family support services can be things such as um, special diets. We can do one-time adaptive equipment fees. We can do respite, where you find a family member, friend, loved one, church member to come give you a little bit of a respite and give a little bit of a break. We can pay that individual without them having to become a certified waiver provider. That funding is per calendar year, so once you use your $1,000, then you're up. Another locally funded option that we have is supported living dollars or local funds. A lot of times we see kiddos that are separating from school and maybe they've done our summer transition program where they've kind of tested out a day program during the summer. They really like it. They're getting ready to separate from school. Great. You don't have a waiver yet, but you know this is the day program that I want to go to when I separate school. This is where I want to go during the day. What we will in Greene County do is use local funds to help pay for you to go to that day program, get established, make sure everything is working out, try it out, and get you established receiving services before we look at enrolling you on a waiver. So we use these local funds to pay for things, like I said, day programming. If somebody's in an acute crisis situation where maybe very unexpectedly their primary caregiver ends up hospitalized, we can give some local money towards that and make sure that person is taken care of, provide that HPC services for a time limited amount of time, and make sure everything's okay. Community resources, we partner with a lot of county agencies, local churches, local companies to provide community resources for things like one-time adaptive equipment needs. So let's say, life is pretty good. The only thing that, would really make a difference is a ramp at the back door. Cool, we can do that. We'll do a one-time authorization for funds. We may work with another county agency or business and we'll get that ramp installed and you're on your way. Things are okay, things are still good. We don't need to look at waiver enrollment at this time because there's really no other unmet need. Now that you can get in and out of that back door of your house, you're good. We partner with a lot of other local companies and agencies to kind of meet those one-off type situations or those one-time things that don't really require ongoing waiver enrollment or ongoing services. We do have some options here in Greene County to meet those different needs that are not an ongoing long-term need. Like I said, each county is a little bit different in what they're able to provide when it comes to alternative options because these services are funded through local taxpayer dollars. So depending on, again, what county you reside in, these alternative options will look a little bit different. Here in Greene County, some of our other ongoing supports that we have that fall outside of waiver services, but can also overlap with waiver services. Transition coordinators, um, they'll help with employability skills. They're a great liaison between school districts and what life looks like after school. So getting connected with day programs, summer transition, you know, looking to see what's out there, and just providing linkage and referrals to the county board or to other services based on age appropriateness and what that need is. We have Service and Support Administration, which is your SSAs. They'll help to design your ISP, which is your service plan, very similar to your IEP. They'll work on updates and changes as life happens, things change, we all get older, we change. They'll advocate for you. They will be your voice at the county board saying, hey, this individual really could benefit from this service, or we have this group of people, you know, that would benefit from some kind of community outreach. They're your best voice. They're that person that's going to help you get what you need. They'll also provide linkage and referrals within the county board to benefits administration, to housing, to any other community needs that you might have. Provider supports, they'll help with provider selection process, so helping you find somebody to provide those waiver services once your loved one is enrolled. They help with certification of new providers, ongoing certification, and then they help us kind of keep an eye on those providers and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and what they're getting paid to do. Benefits coordination and assistance. Like I said, we've in Greene County, Cindy Nava is our contact person for SSI, SSA, SSDI. She helps work with our local Medicaid office with trust setups. She has all kinds of amazing resources for protected trust, stables, accounts, all of those different options, as well as being able to connect you with benefits analysis. Like I said, should your loved one get a job, we want to make sure that they can keep that job and maintain the benefits that they have. Continuous waiver support, interaction with Job and Family Services, and DODD to make sure that we keep your waiver up and running, that we help you maintain that eligibility to keep the services going. We authorize the payments through DODD for services that help meet those identified needs. And then we also assist with provider billing issues. If your provider is struggling with the DODD system or they're getting errors, they're not getting paid, we are absolutely that resource for them to make sure that they're able to continue working with your loved one. The DODD website, I think it still looks kind of like this. They tend to change it on me every once in a while. Um, but if you go to our DODD website and there's a supporting families tab, and down here, this waivers and services, that's that quick link that is on an earlier slide. This will give you a very basic high-level overview of waiver services, and then it'll allow you to click through those different waiver services and read a little bit more about what those are. And here's again what that another version of what that waiver services tab looks like. And here is contact information for some key staff here in Greene County. You have my contact information at the top. My direct supervisor is Tom Schaefer, our Director of Finance and Administration. Denise Somerville is our Director of SSA Services. And then you have our three SSA managers in Chris Keith, Celeste Johnson, and Tricia Montanez. All of these folks have been with the county board for quite a while. They're all fantastic resources. We are happy to help out any way we can. Like I said, if you happen to be someone who's not from Greene County, we've worked together with all of our neighboring counties for quite a while. Like I said, we've all been around for a minute or two. So we probably know exactly who to connect you to in neighboring counties. So if you have any questions, by all means, feel free to reach out. Patty has my contact information as well. If you guys have any additional questions or you think of something later tonight or down the road and you're like, man, I wish I would have asked that. Um, Patty has my information and we're happy to help out, at any point in time. And that's all I had. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Sheila. So far, there's no other questions in the chat box. I did put in a note in there. If you are from another county board and you're on in this session, if you can put your county, put your county board or contact information for that county for parents who might be attending from your area, just someone that they can connect with. If not, if they don't put any, if you're from a county and you don't see your county board's connection, just reach out to Sheila, or you can reach out to me. Sheila will probably knows like everybody like in the different counties associated with
Just about.
similar, yeah. So a lot of the speakers that we have that come on, they know people in other areas. So if you are like, I don't know who to talk to, just reach out to our speakers, reach out to Sheila and they'll get you connected with the proper person. So I'm going to close the recording at this time so that we can openly talk. If anybody wants to just ask questions freely, this is our time for a discussion. So, thank you again, Sheila, for presenting. I
Not a
know this
problem.
is a very difficult topic to really absorb, and it does keep changing. As she
It
mentioned,
does.
the new things that happen, and things have changed since when we first started to now. I mean,
Yeah.
gosh, I started looking at this like in 2010-ish, and all the changes have taken place. So things change and questions occur, so you can always ask. But for right now, I'm going to close the session. Thank you again, and 1 second.
Mhm.